start the countdown.
I want to check the see.
Okay.
Where you at? Where you
So we are live. We just have a countdown before we're officially on. We're gonna start at 7:30. So we're gonna wait till everybody gets to comment or start watching the show. We'll start to see numbers come up.
at? Gary, I don't see you live streaming on here. I don't have a notification. Oh, there
I
it is.
see it.
I
Yeah,
see it.
I see
No.
it.
Cool. I'm excited.
Yep, it says live. I just connected to it.
So this music that you pick out, Gary, this is all from Facebook?
Yeah, because Facebook is very strict on copyright music, so there's a sound library on Facebook, and this guy's got some flow. I just had the website open earlier, but I'll have to put it in the comments because all his songs are good.
Yeah. This was the first one, huh, that you put with the
fog, something the fog, yeah.
Yes. Oh my God, that was so good. Hey Kevin, welcome. We're about to get started in just a few minutes. If you can hang tight, I'd love to hear from you and the questions you might have for our special guest, Lee. Lee is incredible. Can't wait to have her start talking. She's got a lot of good stories to share. Yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. We'll be sure to check them out and answer all the questions you have. Like the underground hip hop days, you know, like
I know, right?
5 and
Well, last time I went to San Francisco, obviously there's a huge Filipino population. I actually went with my girlfriend who's Filipino, and she has cousins out there. So she took me out to this, I mean, it's not quite underground, you know, hip hop spot, but it's like one of those places, like big warehouse in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Yep. That's awesome. That's how they used to do it back in the day, you know, those warehouses, like all underground.
Yep.
I couldn't imagine you in that setting though.
Oh, you don't know me yet.
This is like pre-transformed Mimi.
Actually, was it? Yeah, it was pre-transformation.
So it's funny, even though you can't see my video, I'm basically wearing the same outfit, so it's like a uniform tonight.
Great, well, you look sharp.
Kevin, we got to get you on here too. Love to get you on here. Oh, Mimi, do you know Kevin? Boston?
Yeah.
Do you?
Mm-hmm.
Amazing, I love it. Small world.
How do you know him?
Also through AHN.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, and then just kind of like, you know, we add each other and noticed that there was a lot of mutual friends and.
Yeah, yep. I mean, he did the training a long time ago. I can't remember what LP he is, but he's.
Oh my God! Sorry.
Yeah, he's old school.
I love it.
I think he's early 120 or late 1-teens or something like that.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Actually, do I know?
Deeply, kill your TV and close your eyes. First you might feel sleepy, but pretty soon you start to see your mind like it's 3D. Mental graffiti. You can read like tea leaves. Don't attach, just watch like fishing in the aquarium. Even if it's crazy like you in a sanitarium. Stereo, like a puppet show. It starts come and go. Try not to get caught in the undertow. Focus on your breathing.
man, you guys getting ready for 4th of July indoors? Hopefully someone will do a, public show for us while we're hibernating.
Watch what you think and what your mouth speaking. Psychological housekeeping. You can turn around no matter how deep. Don't let the doubts creep in. Watch what you think and what your mouth speaking. Psychological housekeeping. Take a deep breath now, begin.
All right, we're live with Mimi and Angie on Face to Face.
All right, Gary, thanks a lot again. Shout out to Gary for always being supportive and just killing it over here with the tech. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Show Face to Face. I'm excited to be here today and introduce to you our special guest, Mimi Trong. Quick background on her and I, in a nutshell, she was a client of mine, but quickly just we just hit it off and got to know each other. She brought me into this space of transformation and literally changed my life. I really owe a lot of who I am today and what I've been creating here in this space because of the love and support that she has shown me. And, again, with this community. So here she is, just here to share the nuggets of wisdom, experience, and all the good things. So Mimi, feel free to take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Angie, for bringing me here and sharing my story. And I think really having a conversation and sharing our stories, because I think there's very few, I think in the Asian community, we get to actually have these intimate conversation and dialogue and sharing our background, how we got here, and just know that we're not alone. Sometimes I wonder myself, if we're the same, we're different. So this is a great platform. So I acknowledge you for creating this space.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Just like you said about having conversations, I think that saying or that the idea has been in my head for so long. And it's just finally, let's really step into that space of speaking into something that I think, like you said, many of us maybe feel like we're alone and we're going through this, we're the only one. But in reality, so many of us are struggling with something. It could be, I don't know, career goals. It could be who am I? What makes me happy? In light of, again, the Black Lives Matter, I want us to continue having conversations that really carry substance and are going to create change, because clearly, many of us, we've been going around in our lives thinking hey, all about love and equality. And yet there's so many things happening in this world that are what is going on? I thought we were way ahead of the game. I thought we were past this. And yet here we are. So, we really get to continue creating the conversations and not it just be a trend, just because it happened about a month or two ago that we're talking about it because it's cool or because you got to speak up, or, you know what I mean? Coming from a sincere, genuine place, and that the conversations get to continue happening so that we don't have to keep going backwards.
Sure. Yeah, totally. And it's funny because I was just having this conversation not too long ago about how I wouldn't say that I never acknowledged my race, because obviously it was kind of a fact, but it was never a thing for me where I think of myself or walk around the world thinking, oh, I'm Asian and therefore this is my stereotype. Meaning oftentimes I walk around forgetting that I'm actually Asian and that I may be viewed a certain way, but I didn't grow up this way. So I really grew up in a very, at first, not a diverse space, then a very white space. A very white space, and then a very diverse Asian space. So I think I always saw myself as I'm just a human being. But in the light of everything that's been happening, when I realize when I do that, I'm erasing my race from the conversation. Part of it because I didn't want it to make it an issue, because I didn't think it was an issue. But at the same time, if we don't talk about it, then it's almost like we never acknowledge the issue or whatever issues that comes with it. So all of this is still pretty a new topic for myself, even to even talk about it publicly, because it was never something that I talk about with my friends, because again, either with my Asian friends, we're just Asian people hanging out doing Asian stuff, or even if I hung out with my non-Asian friends, I'm just a friend. It was never like, oh, Mimi's Asian and da 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 da, right? So there was never a distinction in the way that I interacted with people. So I don't know that it necessarily, I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but it's certainly a topic that's surfacing right now.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a lot of like interesting things. Like, where do I begin? You know, like as far as like your upbringing and your, you know, previous to us jumping on the live, we were talking lightly about our background. You know, you mentioned how you were a refugee from Vietnam and you had to stay in the Philippines for a couple months in your life. And, you know, I want to kind of just invite, let's start there, right? Let's like reverse and take it back to the roots, like where it started, your upbringing, and how you ended up in a place, you know, Canada, white culture, and kind of forgetting the identity of who we are. So
yeah.
Sure.
So I was born in Vietnam, left Vietnam pretty much like 2 months after I was born. We were the boat people. And when we say boat people, it means that we have to give up our property to the Vietnamese government. And there's a contract that says, okay, we will let you leave the country and you're relinquishing all rights to being a Vietnamese citizen to go to a different country. But in exchange, we get to own your property. And so my parents had to make that really important decision, which that's a whole different story in of itself. We then went to the Philippines because the plane dropped us off, not the plane, the boat dropped us off in the Philippines, and it was a Red Cross refugee camp, and we stayed there for 6 months. And the way it worked is that you waited for a plane, so that it will take you and drop you off in the country, and it could be any plane from any country, and we don't really know where. So my dad just decided to get on the first plane, which went to Canada. So it wasn't a choice, at least a conscious choice. It was just, oh, the lottery. And we landed in Canada, and I was raised in Canada until I was 19. And then I had an opportunity to come to the United States. And I've been in the States ever since. So culturally, growing up even in Canada, there was a huge cultural difference between me and my parents, especially my mom. I had like a huge like head-butting, you know, upbringing with my mom. She's a very traditional Vietnamese mom, and just like any, I don't think I'm considered first generation, but I'm definitely, you know, as an immigrant child, it's like you are raised in a very Western world, so with very Western mindset and philosophy. So, you know, yeah, that is like a whole conversation we can definitely get to. But language wise, you know, my parents were very traditional. So I spoke Chinese growing up, but my parents spoke Vietnamese together. And so I learned both growing up, and then I learned English watching TV, but I also grew up speaking French in school. So we, before the show started, we talked about identity. Part of it is my life, but who the heck am I if in acquiring all of these languages and assimilating all these values and culture at the same time? I think it got very confusing into my 20s, more so than anything. Like you struggle in elementary school and high school in some capacity, but for me it was more fun. Like I think socially I got along with a lot of different people. So there was never a racial issue growing up. If anything, I think like I realized that it was a benefit for me. I experienced myself as the only Asian, being the only Asian person, felt like I had certain privileges that I didn't realize I had, mostly because I think I was surrounded by adults, like teachers, that realize, hey, she's an immigrant. Let's make sure that she is well integrated. So I always felt welcome. I never felt like I was the outsider. But then in high school, so I grew up very white up until high school. And I actually didn't have any Asian friends until high school because there was no other Asians around me, except for this one Vietnamese girl who was also an immigrant when I was in third grade. But we hung out a little bit, but it wasn't like we became best friends, right? And then when I came to the States, I applied to college, and I only applied to 2 colleges, and it happened to be in Richmond, Virginia. I just followed someone there. If you were to like ask, why would I even go to Virginia? But I only applied to 2 schools, and I realized one school was a public college. It was extremely diverse. And the other college was a private college, and it was very not diverse. It was extremely white, and there's only I think less than 5% was international students. And most students of color were athletes on the scholarship. So, but I consciously chose not to go to the college that was diverse. Almost, I think it was a subconscious decision that I wanted to experience something new and different, and not something that was familiar already. So that would have been my comfort zone. But now that I look back, at least that was what I told myself. Now that I think back, I don't know if it is my comfort zone. I don't know. So as far as how I relate to other Asians, I'm not against it. But there's also a stereotype that I have towards, the Asian community that you get from the Asian community that you don't get from a non-Asian community.
Yeah. What can you be a little more specific?
Yeah, so it's in my own self-prejudice against my own people, right? I feel, number one, there's a level of oppression and expectations and a lack of freedom. And I didn't want to be around more people other children that felt oppressed by having to live up to their parents' expectations. I already felt that way. I didn't want to hang around with more people that felt that way, because to me, it wasn't a way out of it. It was just me falling into that trap. And so that was what I rejected, was it's like the saving face concept that we live with as Asians. And I got that all my life, right? As soon as I did something wrong, my mom would always be saying, why would you do that? Why would you say that? Like that's going to look bad on us. So it really felt like so much pressure to look good and look perfect. And that was exhausting.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like if I affiliated myself and hung out with that type of energy, then I would really feel like I don't have a voice and I don't have the freedom to choose. And I mean, that was one of my biggest struggle too, to decide what the heck I'm going to do when I grow up, because at 5 years old, my mom was already planting the seeds that I must be a doctor. And I remember it was me standing next to her while she's doing dishes, and she was like talking to me and promoting the benefits of being a doctor, and like this logical, rational story about, what being a doctor would mean for me in my life and for my future family. And I was 5 years old. So you can only imagine. I'm sure that is not even new to a lot of Asian people out there. Like, I think it's a common thing, right? The expectation, but that's how it was instilled in me. And I remember when I was 7, I was watching in Canada, we had fashion television, and I used to watch that religiously. And my dream was to become a fashion designer and to put out this amazing collection that would be displayed in fashion shows in Milan and Paris and London and New York. And my mom like crushed that dream, and she's like, there is absolutely no way that my child is going to be, a fashion designer. And she goes, do you think that you can succeed? I mean, that is such hard work. And I'm like, yeah, but being a doctor is not easy, like, either. It's so funny how there's this storyline that I mean, I don't know where. I mean, it's a cultural thing, but I don't think it's only Asian, right?
Yeah,
but there's a lot of immigrant families.
Absolutely. And so instead of being a doctor, you actually ended up being a lawyer. Tell me more about that.
But that was my choice in some ways. Actually, I wanted to, after undergrad, and plus I majored in a degree that no one understand what it is. My parents never, they were just happy that I just graduated from college. They don't understand my major. And I majored in rhetoric and communication studies, which it's like, phew, what is that? And then I went to law school because my parents said no to culinary school. I actually love cooking and I wanted to be a chef, and my dad's like, nope, you're not. That was the only time my dad actually put his foot down. Usually it's my mom that has that influence, but that time my dad says, nope, you're not going to culinary school. So I had 3 options: getting my PhD, going to get my MBA, or go to law school. So it was a process of elimination. And I knew I wanted to have a graduate degree. I just had to choose one, and I didn't know what I'm going to do with it. It was just kind of like one of those things that, oh, well, you're Asian, you're finished bachelor's degree, you kind of had a job, but you don't like your job. So, okay, let's go get a graduate degree type of thing. But I do know that I've always wanted to help people. So, and the funny thing is, my mom, before Vietnam became a communist country, my mom actually was in law school. And in some ways, I followed her footstep without really realizing that.
So what was it about law that had you decide that out of the process, yes, process of elimination, but, was there like some kind of pull towards it, even though you said you didn't necessarily know like what direction, you just were like, hey, that sounds cool, I want to get, my degree.
Again, it was just I knew I want to help people, and I thought that being a lawyer was one way of helping people. I knew I didn't want to help people from a medical standpoint. I also in Canada, well, in Quebec, after high school, you go to CJIP, which is something that you do before you go to university. It's a 2-year program. So in that period, I got my my degree in health sciences, which means I had all the prerequisites to go to med school. And I hated it. It was like the most miserable 2 years of my life. So it was clear to me that medicine was not the way I was going to help people.
Mm.
So I always had a sense of justice inside of me, like what's fair and what's not fair. And I got in so much trouble as a child for talking back to my mom. And, in Asian culture, you never talk back to your parents. Your parents had the last word. I always had to have the last word. And if it meant that I was going to get a slap in my face for that, it didn't matter. It was worth it for me, right? So I realized that that's kind of how I was. And even when I was young, I would argue with my mom about, well, what do you mean being a doctor would be the best job? And I even made that argument. If everybody in the world were doctors, then how would the world function without any other professions?
Right.
And to me, that was my logical mind and argumentative mind, running through me. So kind of like law school was I thought was a way for me to use my skill set to make the world a better place, a more fair and just place.
Mm.
So that's kind of how I made that choice. It wasn't it wasn't because I was pressured by my family, by my parents to get a law degree.
Okay, got it. And so as far as your shift now, you are a leadership coach and astrologer, and you basically tie in the two, which is a really amazing thing. Personally, I see you for your services, and it's been very, very powerful and supportive in my journey. Can you speak into how you transition from lawyer turned leadership coach and astrologer?
Yeah, it was not a overnight thing process. It was it was a 2000. So I graduated law school in 2009, but I didn't really step into being an astrologer until 2013. So what's the math on that? 4 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's 4 years. In the interim, I did some project management. Like I went, I graduated law school at the time where it was a recession. I did immigration law, did not like it at all. And it was very easy for me to quickly go, okay, let me try something different. And I did, which was great. I got a lot of corporate experience being a project manager in IT. I guess I was just using my organizational abilities and just figuring things out on my own, right? But then I left corporate in early 2013. And honestly, I think I would never have chosen astrology. It was something that I did as a hobby since I was 9 years old for fun for myself. Maybe it was a selfish thing. It was just me trying to understand myself. It was never meant for me to share it with the world. But my husband said, I think after 8 months of leaving corporate and doing my research and finding what's next for me, what do I want to do when I grow up, I think he was like, instead of looking elsewhere, why don't you just look at the most obvious place? And the most obvious place was astrology was something that I did passionately. That was something that was the only thing that was consistent in my life, right? Is astrology. And so he's like, give that a try. And if it doesn't work, we'll just figure something else out. But if it did work, great. And I think that after, the moment he said that, I was shocked, mostly because I don't even know a lot of people that would actually suggest that as an option. Especially, I had to work through my own self-worth conversation of, well, I just spent 3 years of my life getting a law degree. I'm still paying my law school like student loans. How am I going to, justify going down this unconventional path? And how am I going to explain it to people that that's what I've chosen to do? Like is something wrong, right? Like there was so much going through emotionally for me that I felt like I had to justify it and prove. But it was kind of those moments in your life where I didn't have anything else to lose, but maybe something to gain. And if it didn't work out, then, even if I felt like I wasted 3 years of law school, I could very well waste time figuring out if being an astrologer is what I wanted to do. But at least that's the only way for me to know, is I have to go through it to really know, because otherwise, if I'm just sitting here pondering, it's not the same thing as going through it and living it and learning from it and realizing what's real and what's not. So I decided to give it a try, and that was August of 2013. And I started telling my friends, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm committing to being a professional astrologer, and I wanted to practice because, I read my own chart, but I've never spent time reading other people's chart in a way that feels like a consultation. Mm-hmm. It was just like you do it for fun. And so I spent the rest of 2013 just reading a bunch of free readings and offering free readings just so that I can build the confidence that I know what my philosophy, what is my approach, what's my process, and put myself in a mindset of this is a business. So what is my brand? What is my voice? So all of that stuff, like literally, not only was I learning to build a business, but I also had to learn what it means to be an astrologer, because that's really practice and experience is really what matters. So I did that, and that was since 2013. And I added coaching after I went through my transformational journey in 2015 and started just coaching, like coaching, just learning and making a lot of mistakes. And there was a point where I had to also learn, how do I integrate both astrology reading and coaching? Because astrology is a lot of telling, coaching is a lot of asking questions. Mm-hmm. And I spent a lot of time figuring that out. And I think building that business was really hard because it meant adding another skill set and redefining who I am. And I feel like this is kind of a theme, always in search of who am I really? What is my real voice in all of this? And not wanting to be just like any other astrologers, not wanting to be just like any other coaches, but what is my style, my voice? Who are my real clients? Who do I actually really want to work with? So there was a whole process, and I think that's a long journey. Mm-hmm. I mean, I finally figured it out, but it was a long process. And sometimes I forget it's been 7 years that I've been doing astrology reading, but sometimes I feel like, I can always feel like I'm saying it's been 5 years for the last X amount of years. So, I just always feel like I'm a student.
Right. And you've, mentioned a lot of things that I really want to dive in a little bit more. Number one, finding your voice, right? Not just in the context of, okay, I'm going to be a life coach now and incorporate astrology in it, but really, again, the journey of like, hey, I'm going to make this career change. how am I going to navigate and share this with not just my friends, but even your family, right? Back to your mom who really wanted to enforce you becoming a doctor. And now you're taking this whole unconventional approach, which, you know, like how many astrologer life coaches, Asian at that, do you know, right? Like, I think I only know one, and that is you. So, you know, tell me more about how you were able to really step into your voice and your power, and I guess you could say like convince your mom, hey, this is what I'm going to do.
Well, I also did a lot of work, personal work, to build my inner strength, to own up to my own choices. Because as I think Asians, is that it's so ingrained. You know how we talk about like systemic racism? I think for Asians, we have this, I don't even know what it's called, but like a systemic sense of we belong to our family and we are not an entity separate from our family, but we are literally like the apple that grows out of the tree, and like whatever the apple is, it's because the tree is. So because you're the child of A and B, and therefore you must be the child of A and B and not an entity separate from entity A and B, right? Mm-hmm. So finding my voice required that I learn how to stand up to my mom. You know, it sounds really bad. I mean, not that my mom was a bully, but it really felt like, oh my gosh, I'm going to disappoint my mom so much because she sacrificed so much. And to go back to the story of when we left Vietnam, my mom did tell me the story of she cried for 2 or 3 nights straight because my grandfather had to convince her to leave the country because he didn't see a future for me when I was born, and he wanted a better future for me, and to stay in a communist country was not an option. But for my mom, she grew up in Vietnam, which I think is also important for a lot of people to understand. Immigrants never want to really leave their home country. It's where they know what they know where they grew up, and leaving their home country to a complete foreign land is very traumatizing. So, you know, I know how hard it was for my mom to choose leaving her parents behind because they were way too old. And for her to embark in a new life that was a really difficult, hard choice. Because I think if she could, she would rather live in a communist country, but in the comfort of being surrounded by people she knows, rather than go to a strange land. So for me to decide to not make her proud was saying that all of that pain that she went through was for nothing. But I also realized that the more I tried to make her happy, the less both of us was happy. Like the more we were both miserable. Mm-hmm. And it all unraveled in actually a car accident that I had that, you know, nothing bad happened to me. It was more about the way that my mom viewed life, and well, not just life, how she looked at how to resolve this car accident situation versus how I viewed how to resolve this car accident situation. It had nothing to do with the accident, but the accident led me to start seeing, wow, the more I try to make her happy, the less she is actually happy, the more she's demanding of me to do exactly what she wants, not what I want. And this is all coming from which body shop should we bring my car to fix? Right? Like it sounds so trivial, but the issue that came up was really deep. And it was at that moment that I realized I really need to stop trying to make my mom happy, not because I don't want her to be happy, but it was at the price of me being really miserable.
Wow, that's so deep. Anyone listening to that, that's like, take a moment to really soak that in, because I find that so many of us Asian and even non-Asian, really, the people pleasing thing, trying to please everybody, is literally, it's just so much work, right? Because like there's so many different kinds of people. So if like half the room wants vanilla and the other one wants chocolate, but you're trying to please everyone, you only have one flavor, like what do? You know what I mean? Combine them both, and then give them all. I mean, like, right? And so we end up depleting and draining ourselves, is trying to figure out, how can I please all these people? I'm split.
Yep, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and we lose ourselves in the process.
Yeah, so that's kind of when I realized, oh, I don't really have my own voice. And literally after that, I actually took myself to therapy because I realized there was so much for me to unravel. And I had a great somatic therapist to help me work through what I just realized about myself, the way that I interacted with my mom. It has nothing to do with my mom. It has everything to do with how I interpret the dream and the life that she had hoped for me. And I don't blame her for it. I totally understand where she's coming from. But at the same time, I desperately needed to figure out a way to find my way, my voice, my identity, because it felt very painful in feeling confused and lost. And if I couldn't even make my own choice of where to bring my car to fix the car, imagine the choices I would be making about my career, you know? So at that moment, that was the thing, that was the event that was the switch for me. And in therapy, I realized how much my mom's voice was overpowering my voice. I couldn't even hear my own voice because the only thing I could hear was my voice speaking into what she wanted for me, not what I actually wanted for myself. So I had to go through that entire process to start separating her from me, not because I wanted to reject her, but because I get to find myself. So in that process of strengthening myself, my voice, it allowed me to build up that courage and that ownership of, okay, I'm an astrologer and that's what I'm choosing to do. My mom still doesn't really completely acknowledges that, but it's okay. And I realize I don't need her to fully approve. And we always talk about, and I always enroll her in the conversation of, I know you want me to be happy and you want me to be able to live a life where I'm not being burdened. So, and to experience my own freedom. And I always bring it back to this. And even after I needed multiple conversations, it wasn't like my mom just let it go in one conversation. It took her years to finally stop asking me about, are you going back to doing law? Are you going back to doing law? Like there was always these moments, I think, of hope in her mind that, oh, what I'm doing is not going to work out, so I can always go back. And I'm like, no, I am so not going back.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Something came up to mind because I'm in a couple of different groups, and I remember a few people have been asking about the uncertainty right now with work, and I'm sorry, this kind of just like came to mind, but
Sure.
because of like really sticking to your guns as far as like direction, right? Because what I'm hearing and what you just shared with me was like, in her eyes, again, parent, because again, why I'm bringing it up is because so many people have that other voice, that the parental or whoever who's influencing them, that they think they should do this, and because of all that extra noise, they themselves again cannot identify what is mine and what is their idea.
Mhm.
And how can I be so sure into who I am, what I'm going to decide, what, and then what direction to go, even when things don't look like they're working out?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this has been my work since 2000. Actually, even before I even decided to go and practice astrology, the car accident situation happened in early 2012, I believe. So, and I moved into astrology in 2013. So that was kind of already like that momentum that was starting for me, like the ball was rolling already for that in preparation for it. But it took me, I think I really finally got experience that freedom until 2017. So 5 years. It took me 5 years to work through separating myself from my mom while still loving and honoring her, but also honoring and finding myself. It was a 5-year process for me. And most of that work has been to get out of my head and into my body. Because in 2010, 2011, I was working for one of the best bosses ever. And for some weird reason, every time I walked into his office, I would cry. And he was the most compassionate, caring boss I've ever had. He was a CIO and also a lawyer. He would practice law on the side and was a full-time CIO. He was like this god boss. And what he made me realize, not that he said anything, but the way that he made me feel and the way that I start having the awareness of why I was crying. The cry was the release of being in the presence of someone that was so compassionate. And that made me feel seen in that weird way. And I didn't really fully understood at that moment, but I knew that all the work that I was doing was heavily left brain. As a child, I wanted to be a fashion designer. So I knew as a child, I was extremely creative. I took art classes up until my last year of senior year in high school because I love art. And I had to take science class in my senior year so that I can get my, health science degree to do pre-med and all that stuff. So along the way, I lost the creative child. And I knew that I have not continued nurturing and develop my creative side. Going to law school, totally left brain analysis, logical reasoning side. Yes, there's some creativity, but it's very like left brain. I was working in IT, very masculine, very left brain. So I was always surrounded myself with very left brain masculine energy. So I was very left brain masculine. So I didn't tap into my right brain. I never tapped into and activated my creativity. So I was fully disconnected from my body. And I could handle pain. I had a very high pain threshold. You know, you worked on my body. I hold energy in my body. I internalize stress. I carry everyone else's energy and stress because I think I have to. And it wasn't until I started learning how to drop and listen to my body and develop my intuition and be able to distinguish the voices that were not mine so that I can hear my voice. Your own, like my own authentic voice lives inside my body. It lives inside my cells. That's where what I know to be mine lives there, not up here. So, to be willing to do the work requires you to be willing to not it's not about ignoring your brain, because I think that our brain is meant and is designed to be used a certain way. But socially, like in our society, we value high education. We're willing to spend hundreds and thousands of dollars for a academic education, but we're never really valuing the money that we would be spending on our own emotional well-being to really deeply connect with the intelligence that lives inside our own body. So then when we get distracted by what everyone is telling us we should be doing, then that's perpetuating, what I need to be doing for everybody, but for myself. And so the real work to know what a person really needs is to start deeply connecting to your own self and recognize, when is it that it's someone else's voice versus your own?
Right. Well, when you say, get to know yourself, I get that. And I think, it's again, like, in the past we've had discussions like self-love, right? So like get to know yourself. How do people get to even that space if they're so disconnected to their own being? Like, where do you even start,
Yeah, you need to really disrupt. You've got to remove yourself from the environment that you're. I'm trying to find an analogy or a metaphor, but it's like, oh my gosh, usually I'm really good at finding a metaphor, but right now I'm kind of at loss. But, if you grew up in an environment with the people that has a very specific mindset with certain lifestyle and mentality and belief system and values, then it's like the Stepford Wives movie, right? Like, you're made perfect because you're supposed to fit in this world. If you remove yourself out of that world, then you become this complete outsider, but you won't never see the contrast between what it would look like to be a Stepford Wives versus Mad Max, right? Like, it's a very different, like, opposite world, but you'll never see the contrast of these two worlds unless you actually allow yourself to go into these different worlds. So I would say the ability, the willingness to remove yourself from the environment that you grew up in and to go and look and explore completely different worlds, to start realizing what's missing for you, because it's the contrast that allows you to see the distinctions.
That's good. That's so true. I feel like in my own personal journey, even prior to transformational work, is when I actually start to really grow as a human in an adulthood, was when I moved out of my home, with my parents' home. Right. Yep. So it's like I honestly, for me, it was a toxic environment, because
Mm-hmm.
I was always around my parents who were yelling, and my dad was always stressed, and there was always something, always something. And it's like the peace couldn't stay for very long. And I remember going, God, I can't wait to get out of here. It's like, even when I struggled, like literally it was like, like I probably should have moved back home. I was just like, no, like anything but that, because I would rather struggle on my own and figure it out than to go backwards. And like, and not to say that if any of you guys are having to go back to home, please don't take that as like, that's not right or whatever. Every case by case situation is different. So I want to be very mindful to point that out. But in my experience, I was just like, no, like I can make it work. Like, like, yes, it's going to struggle, but I see what's on the other side, and I'm going to take this, like the struggle is going to make me that much stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely a good bit of advice to remove yourself out of the environment in which you are, I guess you could say suffocating or drowning in.
Yeah, you just have to learn how to be comfortable in the uncomfortable, right? As they say. So always surround yourself with people that you aspire to be, even though they're at a much higher level than you, and you think that it's wow, like can I even be? But that's the only people you can learn from if that's what you aspire to be.
Yeah. And you know what? Even if those people, right, the people that you look up to are inaccessible to you, there are books, there are public figures, right? People that we can um be inspired from in that case, right? Like there's all sorts of motivational speakers, or if there's like a public figure within your industry, your field of interest, those are the kind of people that you can just, surround yourself with their work, with their words, with the way that they think, be able to step into their minds in a way so that you can it's really about perception, right? If our perception of a certain world or experience is one way, how does someone else that I look up to see it, right?
Yeah.
Could I potentially see, and again, keeping your individuality and your own ideas, however, being influenced in a way that can really support you in who you want to become.
Yeah, and also the willingness to believe that you can.
Yes.
Because it's also easy to say, oh yeah, this person is doing really well, but and give them an excuse like they got lucky or they just happen to have received this opportunity, but it's not going to work out for me. Like if you have that mindset that you can't, then it'll never happen because you're not in that mindset of, oh, but what if you could? Then what would that look like?
Absolutely.
So yes, absolutely. Be inspired. And sometimes a lot of people do read books and it stays there. It doesn't never go beyond that. And it stays a dream. So yeah, be inspired by books, be inspired by movies, talk about it, but also put the action towards it, or at least surround yourself with people that can believe in you and can guide you. And I think also for most people, whether you're Asian or not, it's really hard to admit that you'd want to receive help or assistance. Because we always think, oh no, I'll figure it out one day.
Yep.
But no one really get anywhere by themselves only.
Absolutely. I feel like it's either coming like a pride thing, like I'm too prideful to ask, I got it, or shame, feeling like, oh my gosh, if I ask them for support, that's embarrassing. So
Yeah.
well, in a sense,
I'll bother them.
pride, yeah, exactly, or a sense of like I don't deserve the support. Like who am I? Who cares? Who really cares enough for me to support me in that way?
Sure. Yeah. It's very common.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, cool. We got a question from Isabel. I'm going to read it to you. Okay, Mimi? So she wants to ask if we can speak about your identity of being an astrologist, and does it pause to your identity of being Asian?
Oh, it's interesting. Could you? Yeah, my identity as an astrologer or astrologist. So I did spend some time discovering, so much time, because there's so many types of astrology out there. It just spending time to explore all of the options. It's funny because I'm still evolving. I've chosen to be a modern astrologer, which really means focusing on understanding the archetypes of your astrological chart to understand your own self. Like, why do you feel certain ways? Why do you behave a certain ways, and what are I work really deeply with the lunar nodes, so the north node, the south node. I work with Chiron, so I do a lot of natal chart. I do birthday chart, so every year on your birthday you have a birthday chart. So I love, what I love to do is, number one, helping people to fully discover who they are, obviously, because I was always in search of who am I. And also your evolution, because astrology is cyclical, and to know how you've evolved given the transits every year, what are some of the energies, and work with the energies that was given in your chart, as opposed to feel like you have to figure things out. And I always say, we're not born with a map or a manual on how to be a human being or how to live life, but your astrological chart is a map, not the only map, but a map that contains information that, if you're willing to explore and understand, you can make choices that feels aligned with yourself. It doesn't mean that it has all of the answers, because it's a treasure trove. There's a lot of times people think that astrology is really simple to learn, but it is extremely complex. So, but it's a place to start if you're in that process of learning who you are. And that's my approach to astrology. And I was actually never really into using astrology as a predictive technique and tool, because I really want people to feel empowered to choose their life, that we have a willpower, and that we're not predestined to experience life a very specific way, which traditional astrology has all of the techniques to actually predict a lot of things that is going to happen or not happen in your life. I was really against that. But as I deepen my practice, I'm finding myself to actually study traditional astrology, and that is even way more complex, but I think that I find joy in deepening my practice. So I'm actually currently taking a course on horary astrology, which is a ancient technique on asking the question and having the answer found in the chart. But that in of itself is a whole year's worth of studying. So I will let you guys know when I'm starting to start reading horary charts, because I think it's fascinating. So that's another identity that I think I'm evolving into, is to open myself up to other methods and practices of astrology and ways of using astrology. As far as, does it pause my identity of being Asian? I think that, like you said, Angie, there's very few Asian astrologers, let alone Asian astrologer leadership coach, or just coach in general. No, it doesn't pause. It actually, I think, enhances, because there's not a lot. I think it's great if there's more, but it's definitely not a traditional path. But it doesn't pause. I think it's so funny, because the way that Asian people see astrology is extremely different than the way that I perceive astrology and how I use astrology. But astrology is a big practice in Asia. Like, most families and people do go see astrologers to read their fortune.
Totally.
But I use astrology in a very different way. And I take pride on carving out my own voice and way of utilizing astrology as a tool to really serve people.
Yeah. And I'm a testament again to Mimi's work. That's actually why I wanted to invite her into, because she's really supported me. And I love how she really, it's like customizable to based on what my chart is and what I'm up to, where it falls in and how it can guide me, what's the best way to support me. But it's not like do this and do that. At the end of the day, it's still, we're here to have free choice and create what it is we want, but with some direction. It's kind of like, if you know which way the wind blows, well, if it's blowing this way, and I've put my sails this way, that means I'll probably progress a lot further than if I went against this,
Yeah, but I think I know what Isabel is saying. As I'm listening to you speak, I'm realizing that the mindset of an Asian person, given the way that we grow up, is very different than the way that I'm utilizing the information from your astrological chart. It's actually sometimes it doesn't mesh well, because my approach to astrology is you are an individual independent from your culture.
Exactly.
You're not independent from your family lineage, because I think when you look at children's chart and parents' chart, there's a karmic tie. So, but culturally, it's a cultural clash. Because to tell you that you have a choice, it disrupts your Asian mindset of, wait, I have a choice. I don't have to do what my parents are telling me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, I think that I hope that I answered Isabel's question. I don't know if that's what she meant, but as I'm processing it, that's kind of what's coming up for me.
Awesome. Well, Mimi, unfortunately we've hit our time. I feel like it flew by. I feel like we're just getting started.
Yeah, it's getting really good.
Right. I do want to thank you for being here and sharing your journey and your wisdom with us. If you guys are interested to reach out to Mimi, I have left her website in the comments, but I'm happy to repost them, give her social media handles and all that good stuff. So you can, if you're interested, have more questions, again, please feel free to reach out. And don't forget to also follow us on social media, Instagram, Show Face to Face, and our YouTube. So, we're just churning things in the beginning, but we're gonna keep.
Yes.
Yeah, we got a good lineup.
You guys are doing a great show.
Thank you so much. All right, guys, we'll see you guys next week. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in.